Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome once again to Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits. Remember last week I said I was so unique that even my double doesn't look like me? Well, since then I've received some emails from other people who are not my doubles telling me that they don't look like me either. So I'm even more unique than I thought. You might just want to write that sentence down and let it disturb you in the longer term. Now, this week is very easy to identify what we're going to be doing because we left things dangling in the air last week whilst David Kingsmill was on Broadway, seeing many shows there and telling us all about them, as well as his experiences in London and elsewhere in the British Isles in relation to musical theatre. So, as we've got a lot to get through, many shows indeed, let's listen to the second part of this extensive and exciting conversation with David Kingsmill, when we'll be discussing how to succeed in business without really trying, Anything Goes, Wonderland, the Phantom of the Opera 25th Anniversary Concert, Love Never Dies, Curtains, the Scottsboro Boys, the Mikado, the songs of Stephen Luke Walker, the Hurly-Burly Show. Musical Talk. Well, David, thank you very much for joining me again to continue your sort of tour of the theatre, musical theatre that is, both in Britain and abroad in America.
A very great, if slightly self-indulgent pleasure.
Well, let us see if we can't have you indulging yourself a little more. Because,
I would love to.
I think we're going to go in the other direction. Last time we started in London and we went over to America, so we'll finish your American trip and then we'll come back to London. So
sounds good.
We've already discussed Addams Family, Phantom of the Opera and Spider-Man. But that wasn't all you saw over there, was it?
It wasn't, no. I also saw How to Succeed, Anything Goes, and Wonderland.
So let's talk about, well, which of those has really bitten you and struck you?
That is the most difficult question to answer, and having last time said I was going to limit myself to three choices, I'm here going to limit to two choices, sorry. I'm here going to limit myself to all three. For very different reasons. How to Succeed was far and away the show that we were there I enjoyed the most. Overall, as a complete thing to sit and watch.
Holistically great.
Yes, it was. One of the things that really interested me was the choreography. Everything about the show seemed to be about boxes. I don't mean boxes as in the box step. I mean boxes as in everything was very angular and straight-sided, and it gave a very interesting feel to the show. And bearing in mind that he's working in a business which has a packing department, which has a couple of fairly significant songs happen in it, it seemed, it's obviously it's a very appropriate thing to do. It's also a fantastic score. I have made no secret over the past few months that I'm rather a Frank Lesser fan, and I think this is probably my favourite of his shows that I know.
You see, you're saying all the right things, so you may continue speaking. Lesser is always more.
Indeed. Yes, and I think they modernised the score extremely well.
Oh, go on, how?
Lots of I say modernised, updated perhaps. The one that struck me most of all, and I know we've discussed this before in relation to The Oldest Established from Guys and Dolls, Grand Old Ivy. Yeah. They extended quite a lot. It's twice the length it is on either of the other recordings that are available.
But it's quite a short song in its own right.
It is quite a short song, but they extended it by having, at one point in time, an entire football team runs through J.B. Bigley's office and kind of comes out, does the football thing, and then disappears back beneath his desk again. And they had all this sort of extension, almost a cheerleader feel to part of the song. And it really did feel like there would be absolutely nothing wrong with an entire marching band walking across the stage with a band leader at the front.
Now, here's my question to that. It's just having that being described to me, that sounds like actually the nature of the song being in some way watered down by over-egging. If that makes any kind of sense. Perhaps,
but it didn't feel out of place, because the song in itself is so ridiculous. The choreography was a bit silly, which when you're singing Rip, Rip, Rip the Chipmunk off the field, it kind of has to be. And it was fed into very, very well by this extraordinary partnership of John Larroquette and Daniel Radcliffe. Yes. And the two of them together on stage were extraordinarily funny. I thought they did a really, really good job with this show. And in actual fact, I don't know how rehearsed this was or whether it was off the cuff. At the end, to raise money for charity, they auctioned off the bow tie that Daniel Radcliffe had been wearing the whole way through the show. And I don't recall what it received a fairly princely sum. I don't remember how much. But they did this banter before it, trying to sell this bow tie. And it was hysterical. So whether they were going at it off the cuff or whether they had actually prepared this speech, the on-stage chemistry between those two was marvellous, and obviously that's half of what this show's about.
Sounds good to me.
And so they did, I thought, and Daniel Radcliffe was...
A revelation?
Yes, and I don't mind saying a surprise. I didn't see Equus, so I hadn't seen him on stage before. And I went from my experience of him being Harry Potter, as it is, I suspect, with most people, I then went to go and see him on stage in a very well-respected musical, playing a role that requires a good voice, some good acting to not make it look corny, and at one point, in Brotherhood of Man, the ability to dance very well. And I think I may have mentioned beforehand about the dancing, actually, how well he surprised me with what he did. If anybody's seen the Tony coverage of it, or saw the Tony Awards at the time, he did all of that.
Yeah.
There's even a couple of bits where there's some rather impressive moves where he isn't in that coverage, and yes, he is still doing all of that. And he did it, he nailed every single thing as far as I'm no choreographer, and I can't say how accurate he was, but I never felt like he took away from the group. And on the contrary, actually impressed me with how much he fitted in.
Were they retaining the original Bob Fosse kind of choreography?
Intermixed with this modern boxy feel.
Oh, I see, right.
Boxy and Fosse, yes. Not quite Roxy. It was... Yeah, I haven't actually seen the film. I've seen clips from the film, and what I have seen of the film, it felt like to me they were doing quite differently.
Oh, right, okay.
But that's not to say that they took away from the style. They just didn't use the same dance moves as some things do. You do have a revival and have a sense of, I've heard this song before. And I didn't think, from what little bit I've seen, I didn't feel I got that. There are certain things that have to be there. You have to have the secretaries typing on typewriters, of course, because that's kind of what they do.
Well, it's 60s, isn't it?
It is. And in actual fact, it's kind of almost written into a secretary is not a toy.
Well, it's if you like, the percussion background, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, and it's a remarkably effective tool. Well, Opening Doors from Merrily comes to mind for the same reason. And they did. They made an awful lot of use of that sort of thing and did it extremely well, I thought. But no, I again, came out of it grinning from ear to ear.
Do you know if it's still running in America?
It is.
So obviously Radcliffe has now left.
If I remember correctly, Nick Jonas comes to mind.
Not an actor I know, I'm afraid. So.
No. Yes, he's in that at the moment.
We've always had trouble getting it over here. It was written in 1961. And it was the big hit of 1961. It beat Noel Coward's musical Sail Away.
It did.
And it was seen by an American actor. It was seen by a British businessman called Charlie Claw.
Right.
Who's most famous in this country, if you know your musical theatre, because he was mentioned in a song by Flanders and Swan at the drop of another hat, banging out the status symbols.
Oh, yes, he wasn't he? Yes, I remember.
One of the furnaces in hell having been acquired by Charlie Claw.
Charlie Claw, yes.
Yes, he was an ostentatious businessman who splashed his money around. So in 1969, having seen it in America, he personally, not having no further connection with theatre, brought it over to London, and that's how we got it in London.
Thank goodness we did.
It did, because it's never been revived here professionally since.
Yeah, well, it should be.
Yes, it jolly well ought. I try and go and see amateur versions of it when I'm aware of them, but...
No, it's a marvellous show, and it needs a life. I think it's, this Broadway show has given it one on Broadway, but I would very much like for it to come over here, please.
Well, I think it's better than Guys and Dolls, and as Frank Lesser's work, but even if it wasn't, with Guys and Dolls being a surefire success, and this always being revived, it seems to be revived every 10 to 15 years on Broadway, to great acclaim. Why hasn't it come to London? I sincerely don't know.
But it's not even... I think it was 2003 that... Broderick did it, wasn't it? Or was it earlier than that? It might have been earlier than that. Oh, no, I beg your pardon. Here we go. Matthew Broderick, Broadway cast recording is 1995, so I'm lying through my teeth. So it is actually about 15 years. Yeah. Just over.
But that's quite quick for a revival time, isn't it?
It is, rather.
For a successful revival.
Yes. Yeah. And for something that's done it quite... Again, from having seen the Tony footage of Brotherhood of Man that Broderick did, then seeing Brotherhood of Man done as Radcliffe did, is two very, very different things entirely. But yeah, extremely successful show. And I think, 10 out of 10 show for me.
But there were two other shows that you wanted to mention just from your American...
Yes. Well, Anything Goes for me.
So I've heard, but what show was it?
Aha. Porter is an amazing writer. Anything Goes is an amazing musical. It was the first show I was ever paid to MD, actually.
Oh, right.
And I've always had a sort of place in my heart for that since. But this was an extraordinary production. But whilst I enjoyed How to Succeed a little more holistically, what really stood out for me in Anything Goes were the solo performances, more specifically Sutton Foster. Was just something out of this world. It was an absolute tour de force. The song Anything Goes itself I don't know how long it was, but you sing for X amount of time. They then had what I would imagine was somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes of solid tap dancing, followed by immediately starting to sing again. And the sheer stamina and power that woman put out while she was on stage was unbelievable. We got very, very lucky with this. We wanted to go and see that the day that we ended up seeing Phantom, because whilst we went in to inquire about tickets, that was the private invite-only first performance.
Oh right, okay. So
it was it was fresh out of previews. We then got to see it the very next day. We queued up at. We went and had breakfast and queued up at 8:30 in the morning and got let in at 10:30, whenever it was. Paid $30 per seat and got a box.
Blimey, that's very reasonable.
It was extraordinary. So that equates to what, about £18?
Yeah, for a box.
And we got a box. With extraordinary view. It wasn't like many English boxes are, situated half over the stage.
Yeah.
It was well back.
Or slightly facing away in one or two cases.
Well, yes. And I think we missed probably about 8 square feet of the stage.
Oh, well.
In the backstage right corner.
Yeah.
So
you live with that for
you miss nothing.
$30.
Yes. But while I'm mentioning anything goes, I have to mention, as the song that is, I have to mention the quality of the choreography in that, because the lines in it were amazing. There were tap dancers dancing on, I think, 4 levels of stage on the various levels of the ship, the deck up to the sort of the stacks, and to my untrained, non-choreographer's eye, the lines were perfect the whole way throughout. It was an amazing demonstration.
It's funny because the way you're describing it reminds me of the great 80s revival of 42nd Street.
Oh, yes.
Which came to both Britain and America. And, of course, that was notable for doing what we sort of think of as the Busby Berkeley thing.
Right, yes.
Thousands of people dancing in perfect unison. And that did that then, and everyone was saying, oh, this is something we just haven't seen on the stage for 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, here we are another 20, 30 years later. And, a show of a similar vintage, just a little bit newer.
Yes.
It's only 10 years later than...
Well, I mean, I can't compare it to that revival. I was a bit too young to remember it back then, being somewhere in the region of about 2. But it was... Yeah, it was just one of those things that you looked at this unison and this ensemble work that was going on, and it was so powerful and well done. But another performance I have to mention, simply because I had never seen the man on stage before, tragically, is Joel Grey. And I'm so glad I finally did. He was playing Moonface Martin and was spectacular in the role. He was so particularly Be Like the Bluebird, where the Bluebird was rather brilliantly represented by a very, very small, bright blue follow spot.
Oh, really?
And he would kind of toss the bird from hand to hand, and the follow spot would be bouncing around representing...
He was playing with the lights?
He was playing with the lights. And actually, having follow spotted myself, I can also credit the follow spotter for doing a rather brilliant job, because they were landing on his hand every time. I was really, really impressed with that.
That's very playful.
Yes, I don't remember. I fear, unless somebody was a name on Broadway, I confess I didn't really know who they were, because I simply don't know the Broadway faces. It's the first time I've been there. But I was very impressed by that in general. But those two for me stood out, as well as that song. Not that others didn't, but particularly. And then rolling on from there to a show where I didn't know anybody in advance and have since fallen in love with at least 3 singers. Wonderland, which comes back to what we were discussing last episode of the concept of a musical that didn't last long enough.
Yes.
Wonderland,
in this case, on Broadway.
Yes, Wonderland got 30 previews and 30 performances.
Yeah.
End of story. Which for me is tragic. We were actually advised against seeing this by... there's a chain of shops which are kind of like dress circle. And there's about 6 of them in New York, I think. And there was one which happened to be right up the road from our hotel, and also basically next door to the Marriott. There's a massive Marriott on Times Square, and I can't remember the name of the theatre straight away, but the theatre that Wonderland was on at is part of the building. And so we wandered around before we went to see it, and this chap actually advised us against seeing it.
Really?
Because he said... he didn't think it was kind of up to much, and we went in there, and I think I'm right in saying my other half actually preferred it to How to Succeed, or certainly equally, I think. It was a brilliant show. It looked a lot like Wicked.
So tell us a little bit what it is about, because it's a show a lot of people won't even have heard of.
Well, yes. I mean, Wonderland, it's Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
The concept is that Alice is an older woman. She's in a sort of failing, not entirely successful relationship, and her daughter ends up getting lured down the rabbit hole. But the concept of Wonderland is a mirror image thing, and that everything down there is in mirror images. So the Mad Hatter is played by Kate Shindle, and obviously therefore a woman. And there's a rather... it will stand in my memory, I think, probably forever, where... I think it's the White Rabbit is telling Alice about the Mad Hatter, and a very Mad Hatterish looking person with a massive great big hat and the little ticket in it walks on stage looking very, very bedraggled, and he gets to about the middle of the stage, and Alice is saying, "Oh look, is that him? That must be the Mad Hatter." And they say, "No, this is the ex-Mad Hatter. He was fired." And the Mad Hatter stops in the middle of the stage and just goes and walks off. It's best walk-on performance ever. And Kate Shindle's character has taken over, and the idea is that Kate Shindle is a mirror image of Alice.
Ah, right.
And there's the whole thing of going through the looking glass to look for Chloe, I think is the daughter's name, she meets all the typical characters. But what fascinated me with this show is how they got around the problems that some of the characters present. Obvious case in point, the Cheshire Cat.
Yes.
How do you have a grin on stage without a person there to grin, without doing it with video? And what they did was they made the Cheshire Cat is Hispanic character, which has this rather marvellous song called "Go with the Flow," and hasn't realised that he can't turn invisible anymore.
Oh.
And nobody else quite has the heart to tell him, so he runs round the stage in this Hispanic accent, sort of saying, "You can see the grin, but you can't see the cat." And of course you can, because he's right there. And the way they play it with the story is just fine. Of course you can see him, so let's just have it that you can't. And similarly, the drink me potion that makes Alice small, which is in this, how do you make somebody shrink on stage? So she has to shrink to go through this doorway. She drinks this potion, and of course what happens is that behind her the flats are drawn back, and so the doorway gets gradually bigger, and she turns around and she goes, "How typical of my life, I stay the same size and the door gets bigger."
Yes.
Fine, problem sorted, and they've very cleverly dealt with all of this. And they've stylised every character. So the White Knight is the leader of a boy band. And when he comes on and sings his song, One Night, K-N-I-G-H-T.
Yes, of course.
One Night for Alice in Wonderland. He's backed by a boy band, and it's presented in the most cheesy boy band fashion possible. And it's brilliant for it, because it's just... you get this wealth of different styles within the show, which some people, I suspect, would probably criticise, but I rather enjoyed it.
So how does it resolve as a narrative?
So basically what's happened is that the Hatter has been beheading people without the Queen's say-so, and the Queen sort of comes along and is very, very... she banishes the Hatter to the underground world, and Alice sort of having learnt by this point that the Hatter is actually her alter ego, and then the White Knight Jack comes back and saves her, but is taken down to the underworld, sort of as a part of the sort of saving. However, Alice can leave with her daughter, and she wakes up from a dream back in the real land. And the husband, who is the White Knight when he's in Wonderland, comes and brings back the doll that the daughter had left behind, saying that it's his White Knight syndrome, having to bring it back, ties in, etc., etc. And it's kind of family back together again. So it's a very happy.
So what was it about it that really spoke to you so much? Was it the imagination? Was it the songs? Was it the score?
It was the fun.
Okay.
And I know I've just said that about the previous two shows that we've talked about, but more than anything else, while we were there, it was just insanely fun. Now, I said right at the beginning it looked like Wicked. That was because it was costumed by the same person, I believe. So it has a lot to that. But, the costumes are entertaining. The concept of the caterpillar. The caterpillar's legs are dancing girls, who kind of have these costumes on that represent the caterpillar's legs. And it's all slightly surreal because of that sort of thing. The boy band look that the White Knights sort of but his cronies have.
Yeah.
The representation or the various representations of the Mad Hatter are fantastic costumes. The Queen of Hearts comes on and does a song with people dressed as playing cards, with dancers dressed as playing cards. Particular fun. Welcome to Wonderland, the first major song once Alice actually arrives there, is sung by the entire ensemble, all dressed, kind of looking very Dorothy from Wizard of Oz-esque, and kind of petticoats, and including all the guys.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I tell you what, you're giving me resonances of Wicked, funny enough, because it seems to me that this is not the retelling of a story, as so many musicals now are. They're versions or new versions or reinterpretations of films or whatever text they're using. This is, in fact, where you're required to know a text and then extrapolate a story from it. So in Wicked's case, you're given the prequel, but if you didn't know The Wizard of Oz, the prequel might be much less entertaining, because half the fun is to see where it goes. This is, if you like, the sequel to Alice in Wonderland, with a healthy dose of adult psychology thrown.
Yes.
So, but sometimes that's a step too far, because you're saying you must know the original and you must...
Well, yes, it's funny, I was having this discussion with my girlfriend, actually, just yesterday, as to whether or not I have actually ever read Alice in Wonderland, and I vaguely remember reading at least bits of it, so my thinking is I probably read it when I was a kid. I know the basis of the story, but I wouldn't say that I know it well, and I didn't feel like I was missing anything with this. I appreciate she falls down a rabbit hole and meets all these various characters. I wouldn't necessarily have remembered... I don't think I remember a caterpillar from what I've read. So there's a central character in the musical, you know, one of the band, if you like, the sort of the little group that goes off, which is sort of the White Rabbit, the White Knight, the Caterpillar, El Gato, as he's called,
yes.
And Alice. Don't think I've forgotten anyone there. Who I didn't know. And yet I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I just accepted the story for what it was. And I didn't feel like I needed to know Alice in Wonderland to really understand where it was coming from.
I wonder if this is, and I'm not suggesting for a second, but I'm wondering if this is a cultural thing, because obviously Alice is a British story, and a very literary story. Despite the many adaptations, no adaptation has really caught it, I don't think. And of course there was that Tim Burton film in America, which I haven't seen. Which didn't do very well.
Right.
So I'm wondering actually if the Alice myth is more myth than substance in America, whereas in Britain, I mean, we've just had the first Royal Ballet new production of a musical in 20, 30 years.
I'm desperately trying to see, and the damn thing's sold out, and I can't get a ticket, which is really annoying me.
I think it's been released on DVD.
Job done.
Because they also did their Beatrix Potter revival a couple of years ago on DVD as well.
Ah, I see. Oh, I really hope it does, because I really want. I want to know.
And it was on at Christmas on television, and it was remarkable. And I don't like ballet, you know. Forgive me, dance doesn't speak to me. But I think this is one of the very few times I sat through something and thought, do you know, this is actually rather good, very original, very clever. But I do know the story, and you know, well, we shall see. So,
well, one of the things I think that really sells this show is the fact that it's a Wildhorn show. Frank Wildhorn show, but for me, and maybe I'm just biased because I like it, it doesn't feel as much like a Wildhorn show in the sense of I don't feel like I've heard this song before.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't sound too samey, and I think perhaps because he's experimenting with styles. But the music in it's really strong, and I don't understand why it had such a short run. Bring it over here, please. Or failing that, I'll try at some point. But, you know, I think it's a great show. Really, really good show. So there you go. There's Wonderland.
When we weren't recording, we had a very brief conversation about the shows that you saw in America, and you sort of rated them out of 10 to yourself.
I did.
Those three presumably were right at the top of the scale.
They were.
Where was Spider-Man?
Spider-Man was... well, it was... Out of the 6 I saw, it ranked as number 5, but it was still over... I gave that a 6.
And out of 10,
yeah,
what did you give your lowest ranked show, which I think, and you need to remind us which one it was?
That would be Phantom of the Opera. And just going on, you know, I appreciate I only saw the one performance, and I'm just going on that performance, I gave that a 3. And this is bearing in mind that in London, I would give it between an 8 or a 10 probably every time I've seen it.
And you have seen it several times.
I have.
So, a disappointment on Broadway for the American interpretation of quintessentially British, modern British show. Mm-hmm. But then you came back to Britain and you did see Phantom again, didn't you?
Yes.
But a very special Phantom.
Almost half a year later, I found myself at the 25th anniversary concert. Sort of, you know, bearing in mind it's set in the Paris Opera House, what better venue in London to do this than the Royal Albert Hall?
Yes.
Which inside, you know, I've never been to the Paris Opera House, but it has the feel of that grandeur that Phantom tries to evoke. And they did a spectacular job, I thought, of staging Phantom. And it was semi-staged, of course, but it was much more than what you might expect if somebody told you were going to see a semi-staged production.
Bijou Greenwald.
What was also interesting with it was that everything was expanded. Your ensemble was enormous. Because, loads of people throughout the years who'd played various parts came back and did them. A friend of mine, Nick Greenshields, who was first cover Phantom, I think it was first cover, yes, for quite some time, was asked back into the ensemble to play, and there were various old Phantoms amongst them.
That sentence makes more sense within the context of what we're speaking about.
Well, yes. But it was a wonderful production. I really enjoyed it. And this was bearing in mind that I was, I wasn't close to the front. I was sitting actually, I think, in the highest circle. And I just sat there and bathed in Phantom.
So what was so good about it? Was the fact that it was just writ large?
Well, yes, that certainly helped. I think it's a very big show. It's in it's not a small theatre, but it's not a let's cut that. It's not a massive one either.
The Royal Albert Hall?
No, Her Majesty's.
No, I'm talking about the...
Yes, but I'm saying, bearing in mind it's normally set
I see, right, sorry.
A medium-sized theatre for London.
Yeah.
It's not the Apollo Victoria in terms of its size. Scaling it up, because it is a very big show, and its ambition is big. Scaling it up to fit into the Albert Hall was,
It can support that.
Yes, it can.
In a way that you couldn't do Salad Days now.
Oh, heavens no.
No, exactly.
Salad Days would fall flat over its face if it tried to go in there.
It requires intimacy, where this doesn't so much. This can build up and build up and build up, and in the Royal Albert Hall was given that opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that they didn't do, presumably because they couldn't do, was drop the chandelier.
Yeah.
The chandelier was there, and it was colossal, and they blew it up in the sense of, they had pyrotechnics sort of fired all over it that went off, but they couldn't drop it. But apart from that, they did pretty much everything that they try and do, and in actual fact, some things looked more impressive. So for the graveyard, was it the graveyard scene? I think it was the graveyard scene where in the show he's firing little fireballs at them from his cane. There were flamethrowers set into the floor of the Albert Hall.
Oh, right, okay.
And they did some immensely powerful things with the fact that they had this stage to play with that worked really, really well. And they had boxes to play with. They extended the facade of the Albert Hall's frontage right round so that it literally attached to the stage, so that they did actually have Albert Hall-looking boxes where cast members were sitting in them, literally looking straight down onto the stage, rather than, of course, in the Albert Hall, you're never quite that far over. Yeah. And they built this up really nicely, and they even had this tall frontispiece. The orchestra was behind, and the performers could walk along the top of it and look over. So there were scenes...
kind of gantry. Almost.
Yeah, and they did actually then have the gantry that lowers and raises, which they still used. And there was very little missing. Really, a little less movement. But when I say a little less movement, I'm not even sure there was much less than that. They did a really, really good job of that. And it was very powerful. It was because it was, you had a fantastic orchestra, you had a massive space, and you had a space that's designed to have sound blasted at you, and it did.
So in a strange sense, you've actually upgraded from operetta to opera. We're talking...
It rather felt that way, yes.
Yeah, the Aida, when people now do Aida in stadia, when you have real elephants and things like that. As you say, taking it from a medium-sized theatre to a huge auditorium, and then packing it with the right number of people. I mean, as you know, it's not a show that actually really speaks to me, but to hear a full stage at the Albert Hall singing Masquerade, I imagine would knock your socks off.
It was quite chilling, actually. It was much akin to, a different topic, but going back to...
Then they sang the sequel, Lucasade.
Oh, dear. Both, I think it was The Night of 1,000 Voices in 2010 and the Sondheim Prom. At both of those, I had the overture to Sweeney Todd played on that organ. And of course that's a stunning organ in the first place. It's a stunning piece of music in the first place. You put the two of them together and you just sit there and get chilled. Similar with Masquerade. And it was this extraordinary production. And then of course they had the little bits at the end. Sarah Brightman was there. I saw the evening performance. Michael Crawford legged it from the Palladium to stick his head in the door. You had Anthony Warlow there, John Owen Jones, Ramin, of course, Karim Lou, who played the Phantom throughout it, and Sierra Boggess. You had such wonderful singers there. And not to mention half the people that were in the ensemble cast.
Yes.
And it was just this wonderful mixture of people, space, sound. Like they had 3D screens going on, which they did have some technical difficulties with. 3D screens, sorry, plasma screens, which they did have some technical difficulties with. But it was just this wonderful mixture of events that made this very, very powerful thing. Of course, now available on DVD.
But you'll never get the atmosphere quite.
No. I've seen the DVD. I've watched it. I've loved it. I've gone, wow, that was amazing. And therein the key thing. That was amazing in the sense of that was amazing when I was there.
Yeah,
it's amazing on DVD, and for those people who didn't see it, it will be pretty stunning. But it's not the same.
But it's an aid memoir rather than an actual reliving for you.
Yes, it is.
But that wasn't the only Phantom that you saw.
No.
We've spoken about two Phantoms, but the Phantom did that rare thing in London in 2011. He was available in two separate theatres.
He was indeed.
So you could... I mean, I can't think of another circumstance where you've got the same character portrayed by two different actors in two different shows at two different venues running concurrently. It happens very, very, very rarely.
It does, doesn't it? And
there are so few sequels in musical theatre anyway.
Yes, and of course there are the odd time where two things have covered the same material, sure. But I can't even think of one of them at the moment. I'm sure I should be able to. But yes, Love Never Dies. The Adelphi Theatre way back when. This is jumping back before America, of course. I saw this in March for the third time, having seen it twice in 2010.
But that's changed over its short life. That changed and changed again.
Yes, and I was very grateful, actually, the third time I saw it, that it had changed from the first two, because it made so much more sense. They had the key thing that they added in for me was the development of Meg as a character, because the first two times I saw it, she was just this very bitter, vicious character, and I didn't see a decline that got her there.
Yeah.
Whereas once the rewrite had been done, all of a sudden she
character
started
journey.
off quite bouncy and actually quite glad to see Christine, and then as soon as she realised why Christine was there and the fact that Christine was, in her eyes, usurping her position, then you have her descending into this darker character, and she had a reason. They moved. Of course, the iconic song from the show, Till I Hear You Sing, was all of a sudden in the first 5 minutes. It was the first song that was there, and it felt like it made more sense at the beginning than it did at the end, because you just had this kind of devastated, lonely, yearning phantom presented to you, and you went, okay, that's him, now what else are we looking at? Rather than suddenly having that jumped on you in the middle of the show. And there were various other changes that were made. And
accents.
Aha, yes. And I don't think that... I didn't see a bad change. I mean, paint never dries, as people so eloquently kind of labelled it. I disagreed with. Even when I saw it the first time, I thought the spectacle, coming back to spectacle again, the spectacle and the music in it were wonderful. I disagreed violently with the story. The story was fixed.
Yeah.
If not fixed in the sense of it didn't necessarily become a perfect story, but it was fixed in the sense of all of a sudden it was massively improved. And, I went back in and I saw the musical I wish I'd seen the first two times.
And which might still be on in London if it had been.
Quite possibly. There was a musical in there that had legs, it just never found them. Contrary to some of the other things that we've discussed. So that was an interesting one for me, and I think, whilst I will quite happily say I'm very glad that a theatre has freed up for Sweeney to transfer, and obviously it's had other stuff in the meantime, with One Man, Two Governors. I am sorry that Love Never Dies wasn't better when it started, and therefore, if they'd still gone through the same fixing process, it would have been better
again,
and might not have ended when it did. Interesting show, and what I never did, and I wish I'd done it, and I'm really annoyed I didn't, and my girlfriend did do, was do Phantom in the matinee and Love Never Dies in the evening, and witness in one day the transformation that 10 years has had on these characters. And I wish I'd done that. I planned to, and of course, being me, I said yes, I'll do that, and never did. But
clever idea though. I like that.
Yeah, and you could do it, and you couldn't just see two people in the same city at the same time. You could see them on the same day.
Yes.
But yeah, so there you have it.
Musical talk. So we're back in London.
Yep.
And you've seen lots of other things.
Yes, I have. Way too many to mention in the scope of the time that we have available. If I just run through things that I thought were notable. Curtains I saw at Arts Ed, which is, I've been longing to see that show. I managed to miss it whenever it's been on before, and I was so glad that I saw it.
I think it's actually my favourite Kander and Ebb show. Yes, Cabaret is brilliant. I don't much like Chicago, but actually this is the one that feels funniest, happiest, cleverest.
I'm inclined to agree. I do like Chicago. I've seen Chicago 3 times, not including the film. Although, admittedly, 2 of those were because I took the opportunity to see Ruthie Henschel when she reprised her role. But I do like Chicago. I love Cabaret. I've been in a reduced production of it, and I very much enjoy the music in that. But yes, I think that Curtains. There's something wonderfully jovial about Curtains,
yes.
and whilst it still deals with some dark issues, the simple fact that the daughter is the sort of equity representative, if you like, of this, and is constantly attacking her mother, makes for a rather wonderful dark comedy look at an issue that really does plague all theatre when if you're not setting it up with all of the accepted standards.
It's the most fun.
Yeah,
of their
definitely.
shows by some considerable margin.
Yes.
I also think that whoever gets cast as the British director, and have them change my blocking.
The director is a tour de force of a character, and I think he's wonderful fun. And actually, funnily enough, was the originator of the long-standing duck joke, which has been mentioned on this programme a couple of times.
Shall be mentioned again.
I'm sure it will be. I don't know whether or not this is... I've never read the script for Curtains. I'm sure it's probably their own idea, and a rather brilliant one was they gave him a duck-headed cane, and whenever he was giving somebody a tongue lashing, rather than getting in their face, as you might expect him, he stood back, shouted at them, and stuck the cane in their face. And used this even to the point where once he crossed the stage in front of somebody, and as he walked past them, he flipped the duck round so it was looking over his shoulder. And it was this beautiful little gags in this show that you can do, which probably aren't in the script. I'm sure that one was made up. Compounded by this brilliantly written show that Kander and Ebb have put together. I would say, listening to the CD alone, it ties for me with the Scottsboro Boys.
With the which?
The Scottsboro Boys, which is their most recent show. It was on Broadway, unfortunately, just before I went.
By Kander and Ebb?
By Kander and Ebb.
Now, this is interesting, because obviously Fred Ebb died during the writing of Curtains.
He did, and therefore the Scottsboro Boys is, of course, the last show he had any input in, as far as I'm aware. And it's... I don't know exactly how much he had sort of into this, and how much was sort of having to be filled in by... sort of John Kander. I don't know whether David Thompson had anything to do with it, who wrote the book for the show, to do with the lyrics. I've no idea. But it's a minstrel show, essentially. But the way it's presented is that all of the cast, bar the interlocutor, I think he's called, are black. Genuinely black. So it's a completely black cast, and it's also a completely male cast. So all of the women are also played by all of the men.
Oh, crikey.
And you have the interlocutor, who sort of has... not knowing how he's performed on stage, has a resonance with MC, although less creepy.
Yeah.
He sounds more like a kind of jovial storyteller, and actually, when the boys go off, there's a particular folk song that they sing, and they then sort of they finish off the bit that he recognises, and then add things to it, which are really dark. They talk about, they reminisce, if that's the right word, about their father hanging from a tree as part of the song. Uh-huh. And he's sort of got this character of, now hang on a minute, I don't remember that bit of the song.
Oh, I see.
And he's one of those type characters who kind of guides the action and then gets a bit befuddled when it moves away.
So this is the narrator from Into the Woods then, in that sense?
After a fashion, yes, crossed with MC. Yeah. Now, I am only saying this from hearing, I bought the soundtrack because I saw Kander and Ebb and raised an eyebrow, essentially.
Yes.
Because likewise, I thought that Curtains was Fred Ebb's last contribution. And it received 12 Tony Award nominations in 2011. And very sadly, I think, from what I've heard of it, failed to win any of them. Yeah. But it was an extremely powerful piece. It closed in December 2010, I think. But that's actually a record nomination, I think, because the record nominations without a win previously was 11, which was held by Steel Pier and the original production of Chicago.
And they wrote Steel Pier, and they wrote Chicago.
So it's this extraordinary thing that they have this wonderful misfortune of writing these shows that are so well recognised, they get all these nominations, and then unfortunately fail to actually capitalise on those, which is, I think, a tragedy. And indeed, Scottsboro Boys was second only to the Book of Norman? The Book of Mormon, which received 14 nominations that year, and of course did win some. But that year, Scottsboro Boys was second on the list of how many nominations it got. So it's a wonderfully, sort of powerful show. But it opened, I believe, off-Broadway in 2010, on Broadway in 2010, and in Minneapolis in 2010, and closed in 2010. So it's another one of these short-lived shows that hasn't really, capitalised on what I think is a lot of potential. But a part of me wonders, is the representation of a minstrel show as this is done, quote-unquote, accepted medium? And I use that term very guardedly because I don't really know what the correct one is. But it does seem like interesting territory to be crossing in these times.
It is indeed, yes.
Well,
the question is funny enough because we had a big discussion about the British black and white minstrel show only a few months ago, based on the very excellent play about what it was like to be part of that show in the early 60s at the Edinburgh Fringe last year by Paul Haley. So, but of course, there's enough distance now from those things being done as live, as it were, for it now to have the patina of history. And of course, that also gives you the opportunity to explore. I mean, look at, forgive me, they were never afraid of looking at controversial stuff as Cabaret Pro.
No, absolutely. And, the story of this gets darker still because it sort of tells the story of a group of boys going out to see the world. And they have what was quoted in, I can't remember which publication it was, as being one of the best, or the best recent train song. A wonderful song called "Commencing in Chattanooga," which is brilliant. And as the train is stopped, two runaway girls jump out, and to get out of everything that's going on, they accuse the boys of rape, and they get sent to jail. And they then have this wonderful. There's a nightmare scene where there's a tap dance, the big tap dance number, and the tap dance is a song about the electric chair. So they are dealing with extraordinarily macabre material.
To Kill a Mockingbird comes to mind there, of course. But
yeah, well, it's kind of I think it's along. Now I'm going to admit to literary sort of heresy here and say I don't actually know To Kill a Mockingbird, which is I am in the process of amending that. Yes. But anyway,
so taking us back to Kander and Ebb, we are in a very strange situation whereby Curtains is no longer Curtains for Fred Ebb.
Yes, which is rather peculiar because
and they're utterly different shows.
They are absolutely utterly different shows, and I Miss the Music is cited as being Kander's farewell to Ebb. Which of course is a song in Curtains.
Yes.
So how the writing scheme goes, presumably, therefore, the two were being written at the same time, and Fred Ebb's contribution to the Scottsboro Boys was completed or somehow augmented, but that was all done before I Miss the Music was actually written. So therefore, arguably, a lot of Scottsboro Boys must have been written before Curtains, or certainly before Curtains was finished. But yeah, so it's an interesting one, that. But I recommend the Scottsboro Boys as a soundtrack. If you can deal with the dark material and the way it's presented, it's brilliant.
I will bear that in mind, although, forgive me, I'm still going to pay my money and take Curtains, because actually Curtains is also one of those shows, since I've seen it, I've loved it more and more and more, and it's actually one of those shows that's revving right up into my sort of top 10 musicals.
I would certainly say I listen to it a lot, and it's probably in my top 10 as well. The reason I say that the Scottsboro Boys is possibly a twin favourite, and I'm going purely on how I feel from the soundtrack, because I have seen one and not the other, which makes it an unfair balance. I will listen to the Scottsboro Boys every single time I'm in the mood for it. Where with Curtains, I'll listen to it most of the time just because it's fun, and you like listening. But if I'm in the mood for a dark musical, Scottsboro Boys almost always comes to the fore.
Oh, right, how interesting.
Even I've got quite a collection of, darker musicals in my sort of repertoire of CDs and what have you, and yet the Scottsboro Boys is always at the forefront somewhere.
Interesting.
But yes, I'd recommend people to have a listen to it and judge for themselves, really. But just be aware that you're not going in. You won't come out of it kind of with a Cheshire Cat grin.
Whether you can see El Gato or not.
No.
So we're starting to come to the end of this conversation.
Indeed.
And I know there are so many more shows seen, so let's just gallop through them and just have a one-sentence description of each of them and what it was about them that you thought really lives in your memory now.
Yes, I'll do these ones in chronological order because I have that. The Mikado at the E&O never fails, if you ask me. I've seen that production twice. I saw it first time about 10 years ago.
This is the Jonathan Miller version, the black and white 1920s hotel.
Divine. In a word, I think it's one of the best productions I've ever seen. I thought that. I've never managed to go back and see it again. I finally did last year, and it's a delight. And the simple fact that I forget his name. Is it
Richard Stewart?
There we go. Thank you.
I've had the pleasure of working with Richard Stewart on stage.
Yeah, I seem to remember, we mentioned this at one point before, and I seem to remember being horribly jealous then, and I am still. Wonderful talent. You know, the Executioner's song never fails to amuse anyway, but he's such a talent with those words. And the fact that he can make them use contemporary people and yet make the song sound like Gilbert and Sullivan is a real credit to him. And I say the same of anybody who rewrites the Major General. Those two songs, I think, everybody wants to rewrite them, not everybody can.
No,
Richard Stewart can kill it every time. He does such a spectacular, and I mean kill it in a good way.
Yes.
He does such a spectacular job of that song. I won't go on because I'll just keep going over with superlatives. The songs of Stephen Luke Walker. Interesting. This was very peculiarly... it was at the Charing Cross Theatre, and it was on exactly the same night as the songs of Michael Bruce.
Oh, right.
Which is a very interesting way to have done it. I don't quite know why those two were on the same day, because I wanted to... I will leave it at this. I wanted to go and see both of them, could only go and see one, and rather feel like I picked the wrong one.
Oh, pity.
That is going on what I heard of Michael Bruce, not having seen that concert, and what I felt after the Stephen Luke Walker. I just kind of thought, well, from what everybody's saying, maybe I went to the wrong one. There were some really good bits and pieces in the Stephen Luke Walker, particularly a Harry Potter segment of musical songs about Harry Potter, which were really good fun. But for the two that were on the same night, I felt like I picked the wrong one. Not to say it was all bad, just didn't do it for me. Because it involves music, and I'll raise a few eyebrows by mentioning this, I have to mention the Hurly Burly show.
Which is a burlesque?
It was a burlesque show, which was put on at the Garrick. And I'd always wanted to see burlesque anyway, because it's an art form. And it's seen by a lot of people, I think, as being a seedy one, because I think a lot of people think strip show. And of course that is both what it is and what it isn't, because the art of burlesque is in what you don't show. And the posters for it were, of course, very extravagantly done of Miss Polly Ray, whose show it was, bending over, seen from behind, sorry, Freudian slip there, wearing very little, with see all inside, I think, plastered very, very carefully, covering up her backside. And it is a very, very provocative poster. And of course, you never really see much more than that, because that's what burlesque is. It's about hiding. It's about getting so close, and about teasing. Well, it is innuendo.
Yes, it's a Donald McGill postcard.
Yes, and also very, very skilled. There was a fire-breathing ballet dancer who was... is sort of in this. There was a very good singer, actually, a male singer who was part of it, and did a little bit of sort of burlesque striptease himself. And it was a very powerful show. And for an introduction to burlesque, what really caught my eye was the fact that it was on at the Garrick.
Yes.
It's not a burlesque venue.
It is not, no.
Obviously, it now has Chicago, and therefore, in some bizarre way, has kind of... That's not so true. Although Chicago's obviously not burlesque so much as it is... I suppose it is burlesque.
It's vaudeville.
It is.
That's what that's doing. Do you know who put the money in for the Garrick to be built?
I'm ashamed to say I don't.
W.S. Gilbert. Of the Mikado?
No, I tell a lie, I did know that. I just forgotten, but I had heard that before. Yeah. But yes, it was a very interesting production. So for something as a bit of an experiment, I really enjoyed it. Again, not a musical. Well, a musical in the sense of Flanders and Swan and Tom Lehrer, musical reviews. Tim Minchin and his Heritage Orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall. I'm a big Tim Minchin fan. I've always liked his stuff, and this was the first time I'd seen him live, and it was an unparalleled delight. And unusually for him, he has an orchestra. Normally he has band, piano, whatever. He had a full orchestra, and hearing songs that I'd heard before done with a full orchestra were really interesting. I mean, you had things like The Rock and Roll Nerd, which is an old song of his, and he's done for a long time, and it was one of the first songs, I think it was the first song I ever heard. Very funny and very well done with what was there. And then you have things like Not Perfect and Dark Side, which are his more serious songs. Well, no, Dark Side's pretends to be serious for a little while. But having them with a full orchestra was wonderful. And then he did some other songs which kind of took advantage of the fact that it had an orchestra. And they were brilliant. So, I mean, that was one of the best things I've seen all year. I didn't mention it in our previous episode because it wasn't a musical, and you specifically asked me about some of the best musicals.
He's a closed book to me, Tim Minchin.
I recommend you open it.
No, I've tried, and I closed it.
Oh, have you?
Again. No,
really?
Not for me at all.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, I know I'm very much in the minority on that. But,
yeah, well, I love him, and I thought that was a wonderful show. Very next day, I went back and saw Kerry Ellis, Anthems, her concert at the Royal Albert Hall. 2 days in a row at the Royal Albert. I feel very privileged. Again, fantastic. It was her Anthems album on stage, and I never cease to be amazed by that woman. She's one of my great loves in musical theatre, and I think she does a wonderful job. Obviously, she was supported by Brian May, who I've seen several times when I've seen her, and the two of them on stage are so powerful. And I felt privileged to have been able to see that, actually, because I thought it was a wonderful concert. I will just mention this. I mentioned it in a previous Musical Talk episode. I then saw a few of my favourite songs, which was the series that Mark Shenton did, interviewing people at Jermyn Street, and I saw his interview with Styles and Drew.
Oh, now, interesting.
Which was fascinating. It really was. And I mean, I'd recently been gaining a lot of respect for these two, because when I was the sort of assistant MD of the team that did Hitler was the graduating year from Trinity, their showcase. Although I never had anything to do with the performance, I assistant MD'd the rehearsals, and their other half that they performed as their end-of-year show was a selection of Styles and Drew songs. Obviously the showcase was just their showcase material. But so I gained a lot of, that's when I kind of got my big introduction to them, and it was great to hear them talking live, and hear them talking about their work and how they did things, and, things they've touched on actually on Musical Talk, but perhaps asked in a different way, because they were coming from the perspective of, Mark Shenton's experiences, rather than yours. And there was some really interesting stuff that was brought up there. So just credit to him for doing that. Tommy. I saw next. I'd never seen Tommy before, and it was one of the end-of-year productions at RAM, the Royal Academy of Music, and I thought they did a wonderful job of this. It was actually directed by my cousin, Guy Ritalik, which I didn't know at the time.
Oh, right.
And I sat there in the first half, flicking at the programme every now and then, and I suddenly saw the director's name and thought, I can't believe it, and turned around, and there he was at the lighting box. But yeah, wonderful production, really good singers, very impressed. The National Youth Music Theatre's Sweeney Todd, which was at the Rose Kingston. Brilliant.
Youth Theatre?
National Youth Music Theatre, NYMT.
Teeny Todd, yeah.
Brilliant production. Really impressed with that. At one point, I was going to be involved with it, and unfortunately had to pull out because of Hitler taking up too much time. Yeah. But it was a delightful production. Really glad I got to see it. South Pacific at the Edinburgh in the meantime.
All over London.
Yes.
And everywhere.
Well, after Edinburgh, South Pacific at the Barbican. Wonderful. Loved it. Absolutely brilliant show. Obviously transferred from the Lincoln Centre. And it was wonderful to see a full-scale Rodgers and Hammerstein in this theatre that big. With, can I just say, the full overture. I was so glad to sit back and have the full, whatever it is, 4.5-minute overture played at me, because you don't often get the chance to enjoy that. And a lot of the time, I think, in most theatres in London, people would talk through it, because the art of a 4.5-minute overture doesn't exist anymore, really. So kudos to them for doing that. Brilliant show. Road show at the Mania Chocolate Factory.
Sometimes Roadkill, yes.
Yes. Now you see, I got that. The CD was in the Trinity Library, and I listened to it there.
As Road show or as Bounce?
As as both, I think.
Oh right, okay.
I can't remember, to be honest, but it must have been, because that's where I first heard Road show. And I wasn't quite sure. Having seen it, loved it. I thought it was if I hadn't seen it so late on in the run, and unfortunately I couldn't because of Tom Sawyer the musical, I think, which I was working on at the time. Stunning show. Really, really enjoyed it. Recommend listening to it and give it a chance.
I agree with that. Give it a chance.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think it's top flight Sondheim, but it's certainly
no.
But it's certainly not the worst Sondheim.
And it's very different to a lot of recent Sondheim. There's some interesting harks back to kind of more conventional styles rather than his usual avant-garde, which I think is worth. It's interesting for his development, and having just seen the recent announcement that he's working on a new show with David Ives, I will be very interested to see how he then develops further with something else.
I hope he finishes it, because it took him a long time to get Roadkill going.
True. The Elixir of Love at the E&O again, very interesting, set in a 50s diner in America. Very curious choice. I've been in the Elixir of Love when I was a kid as one of the Dr. Dulcamara's assistants, who were mute the whole way through. I don't even know if they're in the score or whether we just did them. I don't know the libretto well. But very interesting decision, done very well. Another of these shows that had cars on stage.
Yes.
But one of those things that the E&O can pull off, and I think they did a brilliant job. And of course, because they sing in English, they could get away with setting it in an American diner.
Yeah.
Very good show. Soho Cinders, the concert at the Queen's Theatre.
Which is Styles and Drew.
I'd heard music from it before. Wasn't sure what to expect. Really enjoyed it. Very peculiar show, but very, very well told. I first heard it because it was in the Styles and Drew stuff that Trinity did. They had a couple of the songs from it, particularly, or maybe just one. They had You Shall Go to the Ball. And I then heard the bits that are on the Spoonful of Styles and Drew CD. Wasn't sure what to expect. Really enjoyed it. Think the cast helped. Michael Xavier and Joss Slovic opposite each other were fantastic. I then obviously worked with Joss. He was our Benny Southstreet in Guys and Dolls. I have no end of respect for that man. I think he's phenomenally talented, and he did a fantastic job in that. So kudos to him and to Michael for two very strong leading characters, and the rest of the cast indeed. I think that was a fantastically put on concert, and well done to them. Love the fact that they had to do two songs again because the audience laughed so much in them that because they were recording it live, they had to retake. Chichester Sweeney Todd. Wonderful. So glad it's at the Adelphi. Disappointed. I planned to get tickets for every day this week and failed miserably. But it was wonderful. Cannot wait to see what they've done with it to transfer it here.
People alone are just saying Michael Ball looks so different.
Yeah, he really does.
Transformation.
Having never seen him on stage before, I was not expecting this from his reputation. Wonderful. Imelda Staunton as Mrs. Lovett, equally wonderful. The two of them together sell this show for me. I think it's brilliant. Obviously, having spoken to him, Peter Policarpo, also as Beadle Bamford, I actually think he did a really good job of it. Really good. And, well, all the cast. I know we don't have time, or I'd go on about that particular one. I should have mentioned it earlier as one I'd like to talk about, but never mind, perhaps another time. Matilda. Very disappointed. I had a ticket to the very first preview of this that got cancelled. If I'm not mistaken, I think somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, that it was because the technical stuff of it took so long to put into the theatre that they had to lose the first week to get everything ready. I can see why. Very, very complex, very powerful show, written by Tim Minchin.
I know.
I know you're going to go off on one about that, but
you and Nick can love it together.
Yeah, and I thought that the as a song, and I don't want to tell people the name of it, the school song, I think it is. It's a really interesting song the first time through, and it's very interesting to see who clicks what they're doing. And when you then hear it, they then repeat the whole song again and emphasise precisely why it's clever. And it's genius. Tim Minchin's lyrical writing at its best. An interesting one, because it's very rare, it's got nothing to do with musicals or indeed with theatre, but I think it deserves mention because as a musical performance it was wonderful. It's called Distant Worlds, music from Final Fantasy, which was a one-day concert at the Royal Albert Hall, and it's the music from a whole series of video games, written by mostly, although not so much recently, by a Japanese composer called Nobuo Uematsu. It's a world tour that's going around, and this was its very first time in London. And actually, if anybody likes good orchestral music with a bit of fun involved in it, I would really recommend it. It's coming back, I think, on the 2nd of November to the Albert Hall again and doing another one-day, one production. And it was just a wonderful evening. Interesting to see that kind of thing on a stage in front of you. The composer was in residence, as well as Arnie Roth, who's their traditional conductor. Beautiful concert, recommend it. Climbing Uphill. This was like The Songs of My Life, the Peter Policarpo concert. It was Nancy Sullivan did this one. Downstairs, the little space in the Leicester Square Theatre. I have a lot of respect for Nancy. I've been doing workshops with her recently. And I think she's a wonderful performer, and it was an exquisite concert. She chose some really interesting material, a lot of variety, and I think she performed it really well. This is awful. I should have looked this guy's name up before I started talking about this, because I wanted to mention him, and I've forgotten it, and I feel terrible. But the musical director, young up-and-coming guy, did a lot of the arranging, I think. Really good talent. He's worth looking out for. If you can look back and find out who that was, maybe I'll find out from Nancy and plug him in a future episode as the chap I was talking about and forgot his name. I apologise to you, sir. You did a fantastic job. The Songs of My Life, Peter Policarpo's concert. I've done an episode on that. I won't say any more than I did. It was fantastic. Crazy for You at the Novello. I finally got round to seeing this. I've been meaning to for a while because the assistant director of Guys and Dolls, Stephen Whitson's in the cast. That's not the only reason. I wanted to see Crazy for You anyway. It's another one of those, I heard the CD, I loved the score, and I wondered what happened. Interesting. I really enjoyed it. It was kind of what I'd describe as a bit of musical fluff.
Yeah, it's fake Gershwin.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed it. I thought there's some great songs, particularly The real American folk song I really enjoy. I just think it's great fun, particularly for the three guys who do the harmony. And What Causes That, which is the marvellous duo between Bella Zangler and the young, is it Bobby, who's pretending to be him. It's such a brilliant, funny duet. I really, really like that. They're both roaringly drunk. It was beautiful. That whole scene was beautifully done. Masterclass at the Vaudeville Theatre, Tyne Daly. The title describes it. Yeah. It was a masterclass. It was an absolute tour de force. I played the Anthony Candelino, the tenor student in it, years ago, and thought it was a brilliant play then. I think I was about 17 at the time, and I thought it was fantastic. Seeing it on stage, actually getting to watch the whole thing with a brilliant cast, stunning show. Pippin at the Menia Chocolate Factory, interesting, very interesting choices here, very modernised. They did it to, the way they did it was that it was set as a video game. Interesting, allowed them to modernise Pippin while still sticking with the concept of kind of where it's medieval. Enjoyed it, wouldn't have gone to see it again, I don't think, but I'm glad I did for the experience. And lastly, Children of Eden, the concert at the Prince of Wales, I mentioned briefly earlier on. Very good. Really, really enjoyed it. I think that was a fantastic show, and I'm really, really glad I got the chance to see it. And yeah, that's my sum total.
That's an amazing amount of things that you've been to see.
I didn't realise until I sat down and actually thought, I'll in case we talk about this, I'll list what I saw and realise what a mammoth list it really was. But it's good. It's all experience. Particularly for someone wanting to be in musical theatre.
Quite. I look forward to chatting to you again, David, about, basically what you see in the next few months.
I already have a fair few lined up, I don't mind saying.
And you're also going to Edinburgh for the full 3 weeks this year.
I am indeed. I'm taking a show up, but I also intend to go and see an awful lot while I'm there.
So I imagine we'll get to hear quite a lot more about your particular avenue through the world of musical theatre and see where it intersects with mine and everyone else's.
Yes, it will be very interesting to see.
David, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
And I look forward to speaking to you again.
Indeed, likewise.
Musical talk. The Elixir of Love, Soho Cinders, Matilda, Distant Worlds, and Nancy Sullivan in Climbing Uphill. Oh, I see an inexact repeat of last week. The list was so long of the shows that David had seen that I haven't finished them by the time you've listened to the episode. Yes, it was an easy and cheap way of me doing exactly the same thing over and over again, so I didn't have to come up with anything new. But don't tell anyone. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of Musical Talk. I do hope you've enjoyed the last 2 episodes. If you haven't, then you've got no one to blame but yourself. You're just never satisfied. Anyway, that's it for this week. I look forward to speaking to you soon. So until then, enjoy musical theatre. And if you choose not to, then what are you doing listening to this podcast? Silly you. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk was presented by Thos and David Kingsmill and edited by Thos. The music was by David Kingsmill. The episode is copyright Musical Talk 2012.
For some musical out-talks.
I quite like to talk about Wonderland, actually, just because I want to plug that show, because it, again, didn't get its life. Actually, fair tie-in to what we've been discussing.
There goes your... Sorry, that's Will Young.
Was it?
Yep.
Wouldn't know. Don't know what he looks like.
He looks just like that.
Fair enough.
He was on Question Time on Thursday. I do carry on.
I've only seen him in a couple of bits and pieces here and there, so I don't really know. What was I saying?
Lesser is more.
Lesser is more.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats in the Royal Festival Hall, and this evening's performance will continue in 10 minutes.
Oh God, we're going to have 3 more of them, aren't we? Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'm going to check my facts on this while
I... Royal Festival Hall, as this evening's performance will continue in 5 minutes. Thank you.
So, the White Knight is the head of...
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
It should be the 1 minute.
Festival Hall, and this evening's performance is about to continue. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. resolve as a narrative?
I can't remember the end.
Tells his own story.
Defends her until...
Oh, for crying out loud.
Please take your seats in the Royal Festival Hall as this evening's performance is about to continue. Thank you.
We've had that one.
Yeah, we have.
This is Noises Off.
It is, isn't it? Richard Strauss? No, that's the composer. Something... Please edit out Richard Strauss. That's morbidly embarrassing. A very quick mention of a play, just because it was so good. Driving Miss Daisy at the Wyndhams. James Earl Jones and Vanessa Redgrave, unbelievably cast. Beautiful show.
When you say unbelievably cast, I'm assuming actually that it was
unbelievably because they were unbelievably well cast.
I was going to say, if they were unbelievably cast, he would be playing Miss Daisy.